Hello, my fellow readers, as I, Dark Symphony 777, with another fan fiction reading. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. So, we are now in Castlevania week. I know, it's about time. Possibly, I don't know. It depends on what happens on the day I'm recording this. I'm recording like all the fan fiction related stuff side of the things like in one day, like a couple days before the week officially starts. So take this quote with a possible grain of salt. Possible. So the story I am reading is Impossible by Daylight Dove. It is a Castlevania. It's of course a Castlevania video. So let's get started. I want to have a child. Oh, what a way to start, huh? Excuse me, Dracula asked as he looked up from his book and over at his wife where she scanned her own medical book in front of her. I want a child, Lisa repeated. Specifically, I want us to have a child. Lisa, Dracula sighed, closing the book within his grip. He stood and placed the book back on the shelf it came from. You know that is not impossible. It is not impossible. Why am I saying impossible instead of possible? You know that it is not possible. My bad. If it was, Godbrand would have a swarm of little demons with his blood running around by now. We talked about this before. Right now, it might not be, but it could be, Lisa replied, finally looking up from her own book and turning to look at her husband. Lisa? No, listen to me, Lisa cut him off with a glare. Obviously, there was a change in chemical and biological components when you and any other vampire were turned into vampires. This can be seen by the way sunlight burns you. That's debatable. There's such a thing as photosensitivity, but at the time, they didn't know that. Photosensitivity was not exactly a thing in the 1300s. I think Dracula's curse takes place in 1300s. Either 1300s or somewhere around there, within 100 years. How your main source of nutrients is blood. Have you stopped aging? Etc. Clearly, whatever chemical and biological change happened affected the vampire's ability to have children, since the birth of a child has never happened between two vampires or a vampire or a human. Now we only need to see what components changed due to the transformation, and then we can try and figure out how to stimulate the responses needed in order for the fertilization process to take place. Dracula continued to stare at his wife as he came to stand before her, her eyes sparkling with determination. You know there is a much easier way for you to bear a child. No! Lisa cut in again, her glare returning. I will not lay with another man just to have a child. This child will either be from us, or there will be no child at all. Understood? Dracula gave a small smile. Of course. I wouldn't have it any other way. Dracula the man coming in. After all, it was for her determination and strength that he was originally drawn to. And so they worked. They looked through the miles of books within Dracula's library and the multiple diagrams and journals that had been collected to further their knowledge of the human body. They looked into the chemical structures and biological functions of humans, taking note of every chemical component and job in the human body. They would compare this knowledge to knowledge they had of vampires, and Dracula easily offered up what he could in terms of samples, so that the two of them could observe the differences between human cells and vampire cells. After weeks and weeks of research, the two began to attempt to create a solution to the problem before them. They used what small animals they could to observe changes in their breathing patterns, most looking to see if there was an increase in the fertilization process. Two were completely devoted to their research in this time. Dracula would have to watch over his wife closely as she, as a human, was more susceptible to lack of sleep and food than he was. He watched over her, making sure she took care of herself. He also calmed her down when she got frustrated at the lack of progress when the weeks turned into months. She played a part in that as well, as she knew her husband was prone to anger and rash decisions. She also made sure he never went too long without feeding. They watched out for each other because without the other, this would not be happening. When it came to the actual testing, Dracula proposed that any testing that was then moved from animals to them would be tested on him. I would be fine, Lisa would complain, her arms crossed. Yes, but you are more susceptible to complications. Dracula rationalized. Not wrong. In my case, it only takes specific objects, actions, or elements that could truly cause me harm. If we have done this correctly, then whatever it is that vampirism used to be immune to human diseases would not affect the test. If it does, then we will need to adjust it once more. It is my genes that need to be adjusted in order for this to work, so it only makes sense. As I said before, unless holy water was mixed into this injection, you said specific objects, actions, or elements. You didn't say holy water specifically, and everything should be fine. Don't say things like that, she chuckled, her shoulders relaxing, just stating the facts. More months passed until they were entering the new year. So far, no results gave them what they wanted. Dracula would propose that they perhaps need to nullify his vampirism so that the genes that are transmitted during procreation would be closer to humans and hopefully allow a better chance for the egg and sperm fertilizing together. Do you know of any ways to nullify your traits without risking your death? Lisa snapped, running a hand through her hair in stress. Perhaps if the weaknesses were offered in a lesser amount than what would be considered lethal, Dracula replied. I don't want you to put yourself in danger for a possibility that may never happen, Lisa fretted. You said to yourself that this has never been possible before. I got an idea. Lisa, drink some holy water. When have you ever been known to give up? Dracula asked, pulling his wife into his arms. That was me a few months ago. You told me to keep up. That was before you were actually going to risk using weaknesses against vampires, Lisa replied, glaring at her husband. Obviously, it would be balanced out and controlled, Dracula sighed. Excuse me, I trust our intelligence to know what is more than necessary. Besides, we will be using the weaknesses that can be controlled, things such as holy water and garlic. Obviously, sunlight would be of no help here. Yes, but are you really going to let this stop our progress? Dracula pushed. Is the woman who walked up to the most feared castle in all of Wallachia and walked in without any fear, let something that she can control keep her from discovering a new possibility? I just don't want you to harm yourself beyond what you can take. And thank you for your worry, Dracula replied. That is not what I was asking. Lisa stared into her husband's red orbs before a spark relit itself in her eyes as she asked, where can we get the holy water? What happens if this works? Dracula asked as they lay in bed after another wonderful night. You mean when this works, Lisa corrected as she snuggled up to her husband, and if it does, then we will have a child. A beautiful child. Well, yes, Dracula sighed, but I mean during the pregnancy and afterwards. Obviously, this will be different from any normal pregnancy. I'm positive that vampirism will transfer to our child without a doubt, as it will cause a change in my own biology. That means there will be different circumstances than what a human pregnancy would entitle. You may even need to do different things. Eat differently. Shush! Lisa hushed Dracula by placing her hands on his lips. You'll deal with those problems as they come. For now, we need to conceive a child first. Lisa stared into the mirror, a large grin on her face with Dracula standing behind her in shock. They had done it. By the time her next menstrual cycle came, the month following their most recent intercourse, there had been no blood. Obviously, they would need to keep an eye out to make sure this is not a fluke, but this was the first time this has happened in all the years they had been together. I think we did it, Lisa gasped, her hand falling to her stomach. It's impossible, Dracula breathed, but not even his own eyes held wonder and joy. Lisa turned to look at the vampire. Not anymore. It had not been a fluke. By the next month, a noticeable bump had already formed in their stomach, something that wouldn't occur until about 12 weeks into pregnancy. It amazed the two how quickly the birth seemed to progress. But it didn't have long before complications came along with it. Lisa started growing ill and weak, and no matter how much she ate or how much rest she got, there was no change. Eventually, Dracula and Lisa thought about mixing blood in with their food. While Lisa would not benefit from the new ingredient in her meals, they thought their child might. If they were truly a mix of both human and vampire, they would need to accomplish both sides of their genes. After a few weeks of slowly introducing blood into Lisa's diet, there was finally a change in her health. She improved enough that there seemed to be no immediate danger to her or her child, and it was a breath of relief for the new parents. Another complication that came along was the unpredictability of the child's growth. For as quickly as he grew at the beginning of the pregnancy, it seemed that it was only a brief sign of the erraticness of the child's growth. Some weeks it would seem like this pregnancy would progress much quicker than any other human pregnancy, but then 2 months would pass and there would be no change, as if he had been frozen in time like most vampires rather than growing quickly. It worried them, but it seemed to cause no problems other than causing the two of them to worry even more about their unborn child. They continued to keep an eye on the progression until the day finally came. 9 months from the original discovery, Dracula, as well as a few servants he knew were trained in medical procedures, rushed to aid Lisa in her delivery. She cried and screamed, clutching at her husband as the contractions continued to rage through her. After about 12 hours, there was finally a quiet baby resting in one of the servants' arms. Dracula whispered softly to his wife as they took their child to be cleaned up, still silent with only small whimpers escaping their lips rather than full cries. Lisa panted from where she rested on the bed, her eyes following the quiet bundle in the servant's arms. Are they all right? Please, how is our baby? Don't worry, my lady. He is just fine, the servant replied with a soft smile as they returned to pass the bundle into the mother's arms, the father leaning down to get a closer look at the child. Despite the lack of crying, it seems as though he is breathing just fine and is in perfect health as we can guess at the moment. The parents looked down at their child, eyes taken in the small blonde locks at the top of a pale head and golden eyes peeking back at the two of them. He has your hair, Dracula cooed, giving a smile to his wife. And he has your skin, Lisa chuckled. And I suppose the eyes are your part too. Dracula chuckled. Yes, I would suppose that would be the vampire side. Look at what we made, Lisa gasped, eyes filling with tears. Look at her beautiful baby boy. What should we name him? Dracula asked, eyes once again focusing on the baby. Adrian, Lisa breathed, remembering the name she had been favoring since should they have a boy. Our little Adrian. Adrian, Dracula repeated, liking the flow from the name. Adrian Fahrenheit Tepish. Fahrenheit, Lisa asked, a soft chuckle escaping from her tired body as she raised an eyebrow at her husband. Some respectable name. Yeah, name him after temperature. I know that's his actual name, but I couldn't resist the joke. Dracula helped, only getting an amused shake of the head in return. Then Lisa let out a yawn, and Dracula reached out to take their precious bundle from her arms. Rest, my dear. We will be here when you awake. Of course you will, Lisa smiled, her eyelids heavy. After all, we beat the impossible. Yes. Dracula laughed as he settled into a chair beside his wife, his gaze remaining on the small, half-vampire child in his arms. Yes, we did. Okay. That is the story. Sure one. Only about 2,000. I don't think it's bad, but it's way too barren for what the story was trying to accomplish. Like, if the idea of... So the idea is for them to prove the impossible and say a vampire and a human can have a baby, but they just completely skipped the testing. I would have liked to see just them actually doing testing, like showing them like just being a couple, doing couple things, but at the same time just doing some tests. I wasn't expecting any sort of like intercourse here, but I would have liked something more than what was presented. I don't think it's bad. It's just missing stuff. Like, okay, so you have them talking about doing the impossible, and then they start doing the test over weeks and months, but we don't see that actually happening. I think the story would be better if we saw some of the tests, like they take a bunny, they take the thing with the bunny, and then they see what the bunny does with like a female like a bunny of the opposite sex, and then they just watch, and then they talk, thinking what's going to happen. And also kind of, them wondering, and them working out what are they going to name the baby? It's like thinking of baby names, figuring out how they're going to raise the child, what that, like, we need to see more of that. This is them planning for the birth of Alucard. But the fact that we don't see any planning for this type of story, since the fact it's impossible, so it would have made a lot of sense to add in parts where they're discussing, what the name of the baby, maybe like throw in a nod to Castlevania Legends, saying if it's a boy we call her Adrian, if it's a girl we call her Sonya. That would have made a lot of sense. Like them getting supplies, like Lisa going, like Dracula just randomly going into town getting supplies, like wondering what do I get for a woman who's pregnant, and like. Yeah, them trying to plan everything. It would have been better. Like, it would have been far better than what was on offer. To quote Alice Madness Returns. I don't think this is a bad story. I have to say this is a 3 out of 5. Like, it's not bad. It just really needs more to really make it good. Like, yeah, that's what I have to say about the story. So this is impossible. And this has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.